Hey everyone. So this is a 3ds Max tutorial, and we'll be following along with the examples in 3ds Max Basics for Video Game Assets, Volume 1. Okay. So the first 3D model that you do in the textbook here is the curtain wall. So the entire project, based on the image on the cover, is to 3D model an entire castle. So we are going to go ahead and start with the very first object to be modeled is the curtain wall. This happens, it starts on page 32 of chapter 3, and I'll be literally just reading it from the textbook and doing the tutorial and the examples shown to me in the textbook in 3ds Max. Now, it's expected that you will already be sort of familiar with 3ds Max. You've had some opportunity to play around with it, that you've gone through the first 2 chapters on your own and gotten familiar with some 3D modeling techniques. So having said that, we'll go forward with modeling this curtain wall. Now, first thing I just want to mention real quickly is that a lot of the steps in modeling this curtain wall are for practice purposes. In other words, I personally wouldn't necessarily start 3D modeling this object 100% the way it's described here in the textbook. However, it is excellent beginner level tutorial in selecting faces and extruding and counting segments and things of that sort. So I'll explain as we go forward. So here we go. Yeah, so the first thing we're going to do is we need to create a starting primitive here. Now, traditionally, you might start with a 3D object, like say a box or something like this. But for the purposes of this textbook, the way they would have us do it is they would have us begin with a 2D spline of a square, okay, which is our rectangle, if you will. So in order to access 2D objects from this list of 3D objects, we'll need to select this from those list of tabs here, the second one, which is shapes. And we will grab a rectangle. And then we will place a rectangle here on our graph, okay? Now the textbook has some parameters for us. And then perhaps we should have done this first, but it's not too late. So let's double check and make sure that we're functioning under the right parameters, which would be meters. So I'm going to go over to my customize menu, and I'm going to scroll down here to units setup. And inside of the unit setup, we'll see real quickly here that I've got a metric system option here. So I'm going to turn that on, and I'm going to make it meters. I'll click OK. And if we have a look here on the right hand side, you'll notice very quickly under the parameters of this spline that we created, we've got an M is now added to our measurements here. So now we know we will be making this thing to scale, okay, which is very important. So now that we know this, we can go ahead and so we've created our spline, and we are going to make it a 1.25 meters in length. We are going to make the width 1 meter, and then the corner radius will remain 0. So this will be the parameters of this line. Okay. So now that we've done that, we can right click on our spline here and convert to an edible poly. So we'll go to convert to edible poly, and this should fill it in for us, giving us a proper face. Now it's always advised, and of course the book also recommends this, that we center our object. So you'll notice the gizmo here in the middle of our object, and it points to our XYZ directions. If I press W on my keyboard, I'll get my move gizmo. And once the move gizmo is enabled, down here down below, we'll see the transform information for this object in 3D space. So we can go ahead and zero this thing out. Now, as I was pointing out, someone might argue that it would be easier to start this object from a 3D object and just set up the splines or the edges and vertices that way by doing a simple count. However, this is a great way to just practice and learn how extruding works. So the next step in our textbook here is to, well, we should probably have a quick tour here. If we're following along with the textbook, I've now moved forward onto page 37. And if we look here, we're now in the Modify tab. So the Modify tab instantly got enabled the moment we converted this into an editable poly. And if we look in our modifier list, there's editable poly here now. And if we open the drop down, we can see we've got vertex, edge, border, polygon, and element selections that are available to us. They're also available to us here. Vertex, edge, border, face, or polygon, and element mode. I will often refer to polygon mode as face mode, and I will often refer to vertex as vertices or verts. Okay, and I also tend to use my keyboard shortcuts for these selections. So they are the vertex is 1, edge is 2, border 3, polygon 4, and element or object mode is 5. So if I'm moving along too quickly, it's probably because you're noticing that I'm going to be changing my selection method by using the keyboard shortcuts on my keyboard. And I recommend that everyone gets the hang of that as well. Okay. So with that, we're going to need our element or polygon / face selection, and we'll select that face. Okay. Before I do that, I'm going to do one more thing, and this is just a personal choice, and you guys can choose to follow along this example or do your own way. But I also don't like to model on 3D objects that aren't just green. For me, green is just an easier contrast color for me to work with because every selection I make will turn red, and all the vertices are represented in a bluish purple color. So going green makes the contrast nice. I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so once again, make a selection. Now it's turned red. We know we've got our selection made. And our next step is going to be to extrude this. Now there's a couple of ways to extrude this normally. For example, if we were just doing like an eyeballing, we were just going to do an approximation of extrusion. We could just hold shift and pull up, and that would also extrude for us. Okay. However, we're dealing with our textbook, and the model that we're making needs to be of a certain size. It needs to match the placeholder element inside of the game, right? So we need to follow some very specific metrics here. With that, we know what our metrics are, so we can extrapolate the measurements we need. But luckily, we've got our textbook here that's just going to straight up tell us what they are. So the first extrusion that we're going to make with our selection, we'll scroll down into our tools here, and we'll find extrude. Right next to it is a little box, settings. We click that, and we'll get a caddy here. Now this caddy will allow us to extrude this with a little bit more precision. And the first extrusion that we want to make is going to be a 1.5 meter extrusion, like that. Okay. Now, we could hit the check mark, and then that extrusion has now been committed. I'm also going to go over here and turn on my edge faces, by the way. This will allow me to see all of the edges that I'm using. Okay, so I just go to edge, I just go up here to default shading and scroll down to edge faces, and I get all my edges. Right, so we could have done an extrusion simply that way, right, and then moved on to our next extrusion. But another way to do this, in a slightly quicker way, would be to go to extrude with the settings, right? We've got the 1.5 meter extrusion set in. What we can do is when we know we're going to be applying a second extrusion on the same face, we can just hit the plus sign here. And the plus sign is going to leave geometry behind, or topology rather behind, and extrude it even further. But now the second extrusion, we want it to be 3 meters. Okay. So now that we've got that finished, we can hit the check mark, and we've now completed the height of our curtain wall. Okay. Now what we're going to do here is, if we look carefully, what we'll notice is we've got our curtain wall here has a short side and a long side. So this is very important. Make sure you grab from the long side. So with polygon or face selection, we're going to select this face, and we're going to hold shift so that we can also select this face. Sorry, we're going to hold control. We're also going to select this face. Okay. And with that face selected, now we're going to apply a few more extrusions. So reading directly from the textbook here, we are going to extrude 0.35 meters. Okay. So again, we're going to grab extrude with settings. We're going to go into this section of the caddy here, 0.35 meters. Okay, we're going to hit plus once and then the check mark. This will give us 2 identical extrusions at that distance. Okay. Don't mind me, I'm just playing around. Okay. So now for our next step, we're going to come over to this side here. Okay. And we are going to select this face, and then we're going to hold control, and we're going to select all 6 of these faces on this side. Whoops. Be careful with the selections you make. Okay. Make sure that you haven't grabbed anything you did not intend to grab. Okay. And now we are going to make another extrusion. So we're going to extrude these polygons by 1 meter. Okay, so again, we're going to go down to extrude with settings. We're going to click 1 meter, and we're going to hit the plus button. And we are going to extrude this by 1.25 meters. And we're going to carry this on approximately so that we have, let's see here, just according to our book, 9 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 segments. So now as you see it, we've got 3 segments. So we're going to revert back and forth between 1 meter, 1.25 meters until we have 9 segments. So we're going to click plus, and we're going to go back to the 1 meter, and we'll hit plus. We're going to go back to the 1.25 meter. We'll hit plus. We'll go 1 meter, and we'll hit plus. And we'll go 1.25 meter. We'll hit plus, 1 meter, and then finally 1.25 meter. That should be the extent of all of those extrusions, and this should be the result. It's very important for the Merlons that we're going to model later that you don't accidentally get a 1 meter section next to a 1 meter section. So it should start and end with a 1.25 meter section, and then there should be 1, 2, 3, 4 1 meter sections in between each. For our next step, we're going to start to extrude out the pieces that will ultimately become the edge wall of the top of our curtain wall and the Merlons on top of that. Okay. So what we need to do here is we need to select all of the 18 small faces along the top. Now we could go through and hold control and individually select each one of these, which is fine. But we could select just one of them. And if I just select one of them, and then if I hold shift and then select the next one, I can, by just clicking, don't hold click, just click once and let go. You can then scroll all the way down to the bottom here and click again and make a selection that way. So once again, I'll select the first one. Whoops. Sorry, I'll have to hold control for this next one. Okay. Hold shift and click and let go, and then I can scroll just move my mouse all the way over and click again. Okay, so again, I'll explain. Just hold shift, holding shift. I'm holding shift right now. I'll click and release that first face. I'll start to just draw my mouse down that way, click again, and that's done. If I want to add to this selection, I'll have to hold control and click there. Hold shift and click, go all the way down that way. Okay. Now with that selection made, we're ready to do our extrusion, which we are going to extrude this by 1 meter on the Z. So we'll go ahead with extrude with the settings again. And this time we'll switch this to 1 meter. And we'll check mark and be done with that extrusion. Okay. Now it's starting to come together. We're starting to see some progress here and what this is ultimately going to look like. So now we've got our wall section here. So this is like the walkway in the top of our curtain wall, and this is the wall. And now we're going to make the merlons, the really cool pieces that really give it that castle aesthetic. And those merlons are going to be on the 1.25 meter sections that we created. So what we need to do now is actually remove from our selection. So what I'm going to do, we could just simply hold Alt and start deselecting the faces we don't want. This is fine. You're welcome to do that. What I would tend to do, though, is I would go to my 4 quadrants here by holding Alt-W, by clicking Alt-W, and I would tend to go to the top-down view, so my top view, and by holding the Alt key, I would do marquee selections. This is just the process I would do because I find it very quick. Marquee selection is just by holding and clicking, and you get this marquee window, right? So if I undo here, all I'm doing is I'm just selecting both of these simultaneously while holding the Alt key, and then I can go very quickly through them and just remove that, and then I can turn back to my perspective view. Okay, and double check, make sure that all the selections clean. We only got what we want selected, and then once we know we're good, we're going to extrude this with settings once again. This time 0.75 meters. Okay. But now we can do a little bit of cleanup and add detail at the same time. So if you're following along with the textbook, you know that this textbook is pretty cool, and it's done from the point of view of a game design document. So there's a lead game design hand who has already dictated what the metrics are going to be, and what our budget is for the polygon count for the object itself, right? So if we wanted to, we could go up to this plus sign up here. We can go to X view and show statistics, and we'll see that we're currently sitting at 153 polygons. Okay, so one way that we can reduce the polygon count and at the same time give ourselves a little detail is by, well, removing some polygons. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the vertex selection. So you can click here, you can press 1 on your keyboard. And when you do that, you'll see all of the vertices, which are the points between each of the edges, have now become available. And we're going to search down in our Edit Vertices section here, and we're going to click on Target Weld. Target Weld is a toggle, so once I've clicked it, it's on. Okay, in order to stop target welding, I'd have to come back over here and turn it off. So we're going to turn on Target Weld. And what we're going to do here is we're going to take this top row of vertices here, and we're going to weld them down to these vertices down here, which will eliminate approximately 9 polygons for us, as well as give us a little bit more detail. Okay. Actually, it won't eliminate 9. It'll just eliminate like 5, I believe. But in any case, when you're target welding, whatever the first vertices you click is the vert that will do the moving, and the second vertices you click is where that vertices will move to. So I'll demonstrate. I'll select this vert, and you'll see I get a dotted line. Now, if I select the second vert that I want it to weld to, you'll see that vert will move. And now the edge has moved along with it, creating this triangle. But we're going to go ahead and do this all the way along. And now as I complete this next weld, my polygon count should start to go down. So I'll weld there, and I've lost a polygon. And we'll just continue along the line, clicking that and welding down like this. And there you go. Now, once again, there's definitely quicker ways to have accomplished that task, but this is perfect for demonstration and practice. So this is great entry level object modeling here. So I'll go over and I'll turn off the target weld now. Okay. Now let's give our Merlons a little more detail as well. So we already know from the fact that we used real measurements here for the height of our curtain wall, what all of the different heights are for our model. And what we want to do here is we want to make these Merlons have a bit of a peak to them. So if you're following along with your textbooks, I'm on page 46 now. And what we want to do here is we want to select all of these vertices along this very top edge. But this time, we're going to lower that edge down to a specific height. So if we look here in our transform with that one vertice selected, on our Z transform, which is our up and down look direction, we're at 6.25 meters. We're going to drop this down to 5.5 meters. So in order for me to do this selection effectively, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come over to my left side viewport. For some of you, it could be your front. Okay, you might find it might be your front, depending on the direction that you're modeling. Okay, but I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to grab with a marquee selection all of these front vertices. Okay, but you'll have to notice that I've also grabbed all of the vertices behind. So if I'll show you, you'll see I've grabbed all the vertices behind as well, which I don't want. I just want the front ones. So what I do, and this is just my modeling practice, is I'll then go over here and I'll hold Alt and I'll marquee select to deselect all of those. Okay. Now that might seem like a whole lot of extra clicking to do, but I would offer you this option. You could hold Control and then painstakingly click and hopefully not accidentally click on the wrong thing and go along and select each one of these vertices, right? But with a little bit of practice, my selection looks like this. Basically, I've done this, and I do this, and my selection is complete. I've made the selection that I want. Okay. So now that I've made that selection, we got 6.25 meters down here. I can just go here and go 5.5 and enter. And now we've dropped the front of this Merlon down, giving us this neat little peak look. Okay. But now that we've done that, we're going to mimic that effect on this side. However, this time we don't have to just drop it down. We can just target weld again. So we'll go and we'll just enable target welding. Remember, it's a toggle. And I'll just start clicking that vert, and I'll click down this way. And we'll just go along and complete the target weld all the way along. Just like that. And I'll disable my target weld. Like so. Okay. One last effect that we're going to do here is we're going to blunt the edges of these Merlons. Okay. So for that, we're going to need our edge selection. And we're going to have to select each one of these 5 edges for the top of these Merlons. And right now they're very, very pointed. Okay. And we are going to use our chamfer tool this time. So we're going to do chamfer with settings. So if we look down here and edit edges, chamfer with the little box beside it, which gives us chamfer, excuse me, chamfer with settings. Okay. And we are going to apply a 0.05 chamfer to this tip. And above it, we're going to click the chamfer type to be this type, okay, which is the quad chamfer. Now, personally, I have objections to this. I am making this video to follow directly with the textbook, and I don't have any intentions going beyond the textbook. However, this is a whole extra bunch of polygons added that are kind of unnecessary. So I'll click the check mark to complete it. But honestly, professionally speaking, I would go through later and I would remove these edges by right clicking and removing. And then make sure that the vertice ultimately gets removed as well. So like you would select this, right click, remove, and then just the vertices is still there, so you'll need to right click, remove. Again, there's quicker ways to remove this as well. And it would save on our budget a little bit, because if you think of every Merlon now has 2 of those, there's 4 extra polygons for each of the 5 Merlons, extra 20 polygons, which is a lot. But the textbook would have us just do it this way, which is fine for now, right? Entry level, beginner things all being equal. Okay. Now, we haven't done so yet, but now would be a wise time to probably save. So if you haven't saved yet, now would be a good time to save, especially since now we're going to start making some deleting moves and some symmetry moves, okay? Because we've more or less finished the model, with the exception of some small details, okay? So what we're going to do now is we are going to remove unneeded polygons. So we're going to be doing symmetry. This is just half of our curtain wall. We're going to be using a symmetry modifier. In order for us to be able to do a symmetry modifier, we need a clean, open-faced edge in order for the symmetry to attach. So I'm going to press 4 on my keyboard, which will switch me back to the polygon mode. And I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to click and select this, and I'm going to select this with Shift on, and I'm just going to delete all of those faces. Okay. Now, while we're at it, we also don't need the faces below, because frankly, this is a curtain wall that's going to sit on terrain inside of a game. So we don't need any of these faces here. So once again, I'm going to hold Shift and click, move my mouse and click, move my mouse and click, all while holding Shift. And then I'll just delete those faces as well. Okay. Now, before we apply our symmetry modifier, we need to let Max know what edge we want to symmetry from. So we'll need to switch back to our edge select mode. And if we select any, it doesn't matter which one, but any of these outside edges on this side will be all the information Max needs to know where we want to apply symmetry. Okay. Once we've got an edge like that selected, we can now go into 3ds Max's modifier list. Now this modifier list is huge. There's a ton of fun effects that you can apply and add to your 3D models. But the one that we are looking for specifically is called symmetry. We can search for it here. SYM, and we'll find symmetry. Now, once I hit on symmetry, don't be concerned. Everyone will have a slightly different result. Okay. In my case, my result was completely disappeared. Well, that's because we have a couple settings for symmetry that we need to apply here still. First of all, we have to tell it which axis we want to mirror our symmetry on, right? So because we mirrored it on the x-axis, it's now overlapped itself, and therefore it has nothing to show us. But if we do the x with flip, I should get my curtain wall back. So the 2 meshes are no longer overlapping each other. They're now opposite. The mirror now took place opposite itself. You can see the edge I selected is still selected. So depending on which direction you've modeled your curtain wall, you may need to go around and play around with these different options here to get the symmetry to go in the direction for which you've modeled it. Okay. Once you've found the right symmetry that it looks exactly like this. Okay. We can go into our modifier list over here, and we can right click and we can collapse all. Okay. By collapsing this means that we are happy with our symmetry and we want to keep it. We click on yes. And now our modifier list is empty again, and we have completed effectively doing our symmetry. Okay. Now, the one final detail that we're going to apply here is we're going to grab the front part of our curtain wall. Okay. And we are going to apply a little bit of a bump out. We're basically going to like just give it a little bit more detail by pulling this forward. So what I can do here is I'm going to go to my floor panel view, and I'm going to grab the front view. For me, it's my front view. Whatever view for you that looks like this. I'm going to select vertex. I'm going to select these front two bottom vertices. By doing that, if I go back to my perspective mode, you'll notice I've selected all of the vertices along the front, which is exactly what I wanted. I wanted exactly this selection. Okay. And with that selection made, I'm just going to go ahead and eyeball myself a little bit of a pulling that red arrow forward, giving myself a bit of a bump out like that. And there you have it. One completed curtain wall. Okay, if you enjoyed that and you're looking forward to more, then keep subscribed, and I will be adding the other chapters of this exact same textbook as we go forward. Now, the last part of the chapter is a bit of a challenge / exercise for creating a wood table and a chair of your own design. So I would encourage everyone to give that a chance and see what you can accomplish. All right, thanks for watching and good luck.